Welcome to The Week Ahead, a podcast by SBM Intelligence. I'm your host, Veronica Pana Igube. Every Friday, we explore stories that are shaping our continent. Credit to the federal government has increased sharply as Nigeria seeks advisors for a new Eurobond issuance to raise funds from international markets and meet its financial needs. Will increased borrowing strengthen Nigeria's economy or deepen its debt challenges? The Dangote Refinery has attracted nearly $2 billion through its IPO and secured additional crude supply from the United Arab Emirates, strengthening its expansion plans. Will this development cement Dangote Refinery's position as a key player in Africa's energy sector? Deadly floods in Ivory Coast has killed about 20 people and are threatening the country's cocoa mid-crop, raising concerns over the impact of extreme weathers on life and agricultural production. What steps should African governments take to protect communities and key industries for climate change related disasters? Joining us today for further insight is David Olujimi. Welcome, David, to the podcast.
Hi, thank you so much for having me, Veronica.
It's such a pleasure to have you. On this
Yeah,
episode, let's start with our first story, where we see
okay.
the credit to Nigeria's government. Nigeria is seeking advice on, to increase or to have a new Eurobond issuance. Um, let's take our listeners back to understand. Can you just give us a backstory on how the Eurobond issue
Eurobond.
works? And do you think this is a good step? Um, does it take us into a borrowing sinkhole, or does this help boost our economy? Is this something that we need right now, or something that Nigeria doesn't need? What's your thought on this?
So, in 2025, the government issued Eurobonds. November 2025 specifically, the government issued $2.35 billion Eurobonds. Those Eurobonds were priced as high as 9%, and we saw others reaching about $13 billion. It means that the oversubscription where like where you want to put it is oversubscription were over 500% because of the rates, right? It put the government in some kind of frenzy, and for a government that needs a lot of wins on its plate, especially when it comes to PR, they celebrated, like there was a whole media frenzy around the amount of subscription, $13 billion and all. Then now we're seeing in 2026 the government wants to go again. Basically, what this is going to do for us is that it's going to position Nigeria's debt to hit, I don't know how much they're going to raise, but basically it's going to put our debt to GDP ratio at over, okay. It's going to put our debt to GDP ratio at over 50%. So, while debt to GDP ratio is usually not like the key metric to track, the most important metric to track is the sustainability of the debt. What the most important metric that is tracked is something called the um, revenue, um, debt servicing to revenue, basically. And for us that we already have it at about 70%-ish, is going to take it much higher. About whether it is the right thing to do or is not the right thing to do. So the thing there is that there is no one size fits all approach when it comes to government financing, especially when it comes to fiscal policy measures. So it's quite evident that the government of the day has an agenda, especially when it comes to austerity measures are not their thing, right? There is no plan for austerity measures. But The plan, one thing that you can observe with them is that they are a government of a lot of spending. They want to position themselves to be like a government that spends a lot. They want to do all of the big infrastructure, they want to build the landmark infrastructure as they will have it. So they want to build like a coastal road. Beyond this new Eurobond borrowing, let's not forget that there's another $5 billion that is coming in from not even 5 billion, $6 billion. $5 billion coming in from a bank in Abu Dhabi, the UAE. There's a lot of borrowing going on. All of these borrowings put together is taking us. We like call it down. We like say it is down a dead sinkhole, but I know that it's putting us in a very precarious situation. It's not a situation that we cannot deal with in the future with proper management. But if there is no proper management, it's going to be a huge sinkhole for us. Because this debt, one of the factors that we have to consider in this debt is the sustainability of it, the rates at which these things are coming. Unlike 2015, not 2015, 2013, the government of the day there were some bilateral borrowings that were done at the time Nigeria was enjoying concessional lending from China. China was borrowing us money at 2%, 3%, concessional lending. But we don't have any of such anymore. So now Nigeria has to borrow. We have the treasury bills that are going up to 16%. We have Eurobonds going up to 9%. We have NGN bonds going up to FGM bonds going up to 12, 13, 14%. So it's a lot of double-digit borrowing, and a lot of this double-digit borrowing is in foreign currency. One thing that I know, whatever must happen, the currency must stay stable. Whatever will happen, say over the next 10 years. In fact, between 2026 to say maybe 2036, like the currency must stay stable because it's going to be a severe damage to the economy if Nigeria now has to pay back loans at those high interest rates and now have to pay it at a devaluated and still another devaluated currency. It's going to tell on everybody. Another thing here is that if there is an impact assessment of what these borrowings are being used to fund, maybe if there is an impact assessment and there is a potential economic impact assessment of, okay, this is what this is going to bring, then, okay, maybe it will be good. But we really don't know. Unlike in the past, when borrowings will be done, borrowings are tied to projects, borrowings are tied to things. Okay, this is what we're borrowing for. The Eurobonds, we don't know where it was tied to. The $5 billion borrowing, we don't know what it is tied to. The only borrowing that of recent that we've been told what it's tied to is the $1 billion borrowing from Citibank in the UK that they say is tied to the renovation of Apapa and Tinkan ports. So, okay, like I said in the beginning, it's not a one-size-fits-all situation. We can't say, okay, I would say the only way to go is fiscal fiscal. We don't have that. So I can't say the only way to go is fiscal contraction. We are presently dealing with monetary contraction. We can't say, okay, fiscal contraction is the next part to go. It doesn't work that way. So I can't necessarily also say fiscal expansion. I'm not necessarily seeing a lot of fiscal expansion right now. We're not seeing a lot of fiscal expansion right now because what's going on in the economy, we've seen subsidy dropped. We've seen a lot of the subsidies dropped, So government is not really doing so much to spend on the people as such. So there's no one side, but the reality of it is that we may be putting ourselves in a very precarious situation if we don't have super efficient managers in the future. Because this government is not borrowing for now. All of this is tied to our future as a country. It's just like with Ghana. 2021, they had to go into the defaults in their debt. They had to default on their every debt that they had. And it wasn't because of what just happened, like say 2020, 2019. No, it's because of borrowings that predates as far back as 2008, 2009, at least as far back as 2006. A lot of those borrowings happened. It's the same, something is similar happened in Nigeria in the past. We had $30 billion obligation to the Paris Club of Lenders. And when you look at it, over 18 billion of that money, the original money that was lended was $9 billion. But because of interest that had grown and all of the sanctions that were on Nigeria in the 1990s, that money grew from $9 billion with the interest rate and penalties. It grew to $30 billion, you can imagine. So it now took another serious team of managers to come forward and say, okay, let's come up with a deal and deal with this thing. So we hopefully do not get into this situation in the future. But I think the government should exercise caution with their tendency to borrow. Yeah, that's where I'll stop on that.
To be honest, David, I do agree with you. The government needs
Veronica.
to. Yes, I can hear you. Yes, I can hear you. I was saying
Okay, okay.
the government needs to take caution. I do agree with you when you said that the government needs to take caution in its borrowing. You also mentioned that it's important that the government tie the borrowing to a project. I mean, this ensures that we know where the money is going to. And, if we don't see that money going there, then it's easy for us to say, hold the government accountable to say, but you had promised this money was going to be handled for this project. You
Okay,
also
okay.
you also mentioned a super officer manager that would kind of like be like a watch guard on how the finances are used. And I love the fact that you talked about the impact assessment, which is really, really important because that would help us to be able to know what are the risks that would are possible to come with this loan and how can we mitigate that risk. Let's move on to our second story with Dangote Refinery. Dangote Refinery has attracted nearly $2 billion. That's a lot of money through its IPO. We're seeing a lot of
Yes, what are the risks for
investors.
them?
Yeah, we're seeing a lot of investor interest, right? From private investors to even the Nigerian public are waiting for this IPO. What do you think is driving this level of investment interest in the Dangote refinery? And also, how significant is the refinery's new
Yeah,
crude supply agreement with the UAE
I
um,
feel.
for its long-term operation? Did you get that?
So the thing here is that I would say hype. Yeah, there's this hype around the market. It's similar to what you have with SpaceX, right? Um, recently SpaceX did an IPO where they give out 4.25% of their company and raised $75 billion from it. Can you imagine that volume of money for just 4% of a company that has never turned a profit before?
Mm.
So the thing with hype is that hype does its work. And you've been seeing the hype. Actually, if you pay attention, you discover that Dangote has been working over time. He's been marketing it, he's been hawking it. We saw the School of Hard Knocks guy came to Nigeria to talk to Dangote. All of it were this part of the hype, it's part of the marketing. We also saw Dangote go on the podcast that is run by the Norwegian Public Investment Fund. I've forgotten the name now. The Norsken Fund. So the Norsken Fund is basically the largest sovereign wealth fund, and they are the largest investors in equities. So they have over $1 trillion of equities in different companies across the world. So we saw Dangote go on their to call it they have a podcast, the podcast now. So Dangote also went on. So it's been doing a lot of marketing, and those marketing have been yielding a lot of results. A lot of results. Everybody wants to participate in Africa's next big thing. First of all, this is the biggest IPO in African history. They were talking of an IPO that's going to be on five different stock markets in Africa. not in New York, not in London, just Africa. So for the Africans, it's like the chance to be involved in the next big thing, you know? It's a chance to show that, okay, yeah, we too were involved in the next big thing. Then also, Dangote has a track record, right? Dangote has a track record with his companies, right? His companies most times always do turn a profit, especially the listed ones. Except now we've seen the situation turn with Dangote Sugar Refinery. I will not say he has 100% success rate because a lot of companies have failed. But when it comes to stuff like his big boys, his big players, right? He has a good turnover rate with those companies. Um, so for the institutional investors across Africa, it's normal, you know, it's time to get involved in the African play. There's also the thing around Africa being a frontier. There's also the thing around a lot of African markets being frontier markets. There's this thing about wanting to touch the biggest. I think that refinery is probably the fifth or the sixth largest refinery in the world right now. And there's this tendency to, okay, let us see what is there, you know, let us see what's there. For every institutional investor in Nigeria right now, in fact, it is even such that Pencom had to do a waiver. Pencom did a waiver for pension fund administrators on how much they can invest in equities just because of that refinery. There's this thing around, let us get in there. There's never been any IPO with as much hype in Nigerian history as this IPO. There's never been anyone. I think the biggest IPO in Nigerian history today is I want to go back and get my facts right. But I think the biggest IPO is the one done by GT. GT IPO raised 285 billion naira. But when it comes to the dollar equivalent, the biggest IPO is the IPO done by Access in 2007. They raised about $1 billion. At the time, was about 140 to 150 billion naira at that time. So that was significant for them, right? But for Dangote right now, the hype is low, the hype is there. And Dangote is doing the right things by engaging all the Nigerian guys. So he's not engaged any foreign market player right now. He's used Nigerian stockbrokers. He's engaged as many domestic stockbrokers as possible, as many domestic issuing houses as possible. So he's engaged a lot of domestic players as much as he could. It's giving the vibe of, okay, yes, this is our project, this is our thing in Africa, in Nigeria especially. So if he lists on Kenya, lists on Johannesburg, lists on Lagos, and I think he's listing on Accra too, listing in Ghana. I've forgotten the fifth one now. Basically, the point is this is our thing in Africa. This is something that everybody wants to be involved. You know, there's this FOMO with it, this fear of missing out thing that is also there. So it's quite understandable, and the company has also done a lot of marketing when it comes to what's going on. So it's not out of order that we are seeing what we are seeing right now, Sha. Yeah,
I mean, it it may not be all hype in the sense that the refinery is really making a difference in Nigeria, and I feel like it's going to also make a difference in Africa, and that's why we have a lot of players who are who want to invest. Like you said, the next best thing, everybody wants to invest, and like you said, the strategic marketing. I can't lie, there's strategic
yeah.
marketing about this IPO. If you go on social media, a lot of creators are having these conversations, telling
On my
Nigeria
phone right now,
to pre.
there's a pop-up from Invest Nigeria, an app on my phone. The thing is, be IPO ready. Have you set up your CSCS and CHN account? It's just if you go on Bamboo, it's the first thing hitting your face, IPO. So even some of the keywords, in fact, some people will probably think IPO means something revolving around Dangote now. Some people don't even know the meaning of the word IPO. They just hear IPO, and IPO is all in our faces. So, like you say, it's true. Strategic marketing is all over the place.
Sure. I mean, you can't blame him. This is really a key project for him, and
Yeah,
I
yeah.
mean, we wish him all the best, and I'm sure it's going to be successful. Let's move on to our final story where we're seeing deadly floods in Ivory Coast, but we're also seeing deadly floods across African nations. We've seen in Ghana, we've seen in Nigeria as well, in Lagos. For specifically, Ivory Coast is affecting the livelihood, the cocoa production, which is the kind of like the lifeline of the economy in Ivory Coast. What can we learn as an
So
African
the thing, the thing,
nation
with-
to
the
prepare
thing with Ivory
ourselves
Coast,
for
right?
climate change and its effects?
So the thing with Ivory Coast, right, is about the Ivory. So these countries are when you want to talk about the tropics. These are the tropics of Africa, basically. I'm talking from parts of Nigeria. In Nigeria we have the mangrove swamp, we have the tropical, we have all of West Africa, all of Western Nigeria is known as the tropics. It's quite different from the mangrove swamp which you see in the south, Bayelsa and Delta and rivers. In those parts of the world, Ivory Coast, Ghana, one of the major key characteristics that defines their geography is presence of rainfall, like very heavy rainfall. I think for those countries still, it's not these things that have happened right now. It's not a shocker. It's a yearly event that floods kill people in Abidjan, in Ivory Coast. There is a need for them to have come up with measures to be able to trap flood water and somehow craft drainage pathways and release them. The same problems it's just a reflection of how West Africans are having the same problems. We have the same problems from country to country to country. It's a very, how will I describe it now? It's quite sad, but it's a reality that one cannot really. I don't know how. For example, in Ghana, you have the same problems, flooded drainages, people building on the canal waterways. I don't understand why the government's reason in the same pattern. I still don't understand why. Why the people, the government, everybody does things. So one thing I even noticed with Ghana is that Ghana has even more. So people talk about how Lagos is on the people Nigerians we like to talk about how Lagos is on like 40 meters above sea level. Some parts of Lagos are on sea level. Ivory Coast is even on lower sea level. Ivory Coast and Ghana, they're even on lower sea levels. Makes it even worse for them. So some parts of those countries are very low. And to be expected that okay, when you have lowlands like what you have in those places, you will probably put up systems to prevent this kind of occurrences. The same thing happened in Ghana last year. Same thing happened in Ghana 2 years ago. Happened 3 years ago. When you go on the internet, you see videos from 10 years ago, 10 years ago, 9 years ago, 7 years ago, 6 years ago, 5 years ago, in the same two countries, Ghana and Ivory Coast. And it's the same thing that also happens every year in Nairobi, Kenya. Nairobi, Kenya, and the one of Nairobi, Kenya is even worse. Because Nairobi, Kenya is when you hear 100 dead, 200 dead. It's worse in those places. There's a need for us to start putting environmental sustainability as like a very key core part of governance. People should be able to, the government of the people, when you are campaigning to rule, it should be a core messaging that you put forward to say, okay, this is what we'll do to ensure that we don't lose livelihood, we don't lose economies to things like flood, right? In Netherlands is plus or minus 0.5 meters above sea level. They put in a lot of measures. They've built systems for over 100 years to ensure that, okay, they don't suffer flood anymore. In Tokyo, Japan, they too are located just on the sea level, like 0 meters above sea level. What they did, they built in 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 Japan, they built waterways, they built flood banks 40 meters into the ground. How they do it, I don't know. But you have to spend. economic resources to protect the economy. So for Cote d'Ivoire, right, they would always, and I think another problem is the fact that they believe that they'll survive. Next year it will happen, they'll survive. If you don't die, it's like a survival of the fittest kind of situation. That's why I tell people that one of the things in Africa that God God saved us. God saved us because we don't suffer the kind of situations that parts of the world suffer. Like what's happening in Venezuela. Sometimes I imagine if it was in Africa where this was a regular occurrence, just like in Japan. In Japan, they suffer earthquakes like every year. Every year. But yet, in fact, I think it's in Japan that I think there's a part of America where they suffer earthquakes. I think that's in California, the state of California. They suffer earthquakes like, in fact, based on what I'm saying now, there was just some earthquake in Japan some 3, 4 days ago. It's just there was another one that happened today, a 6 magnitude earthquake. It happened in Japan. But they've decided that, okay, this is a situation we cannot deal with. It's a natural occurrence. So what they do is they build earthquake-proof buildings. In the past, it was floods. They used to suffer floods a lot. Started to build flood-proof cities. They will build cities that are always that are protected against flood. Now, people will say things like they block the drainage blockade. Those are pedestrian views to these things. I'll give an example. Of all the flood happening in Lagos, of all of the floods and everything that is happening in Lagos, guess the part of Lagos where you will not see flood is Eco Atlantic. This is Eco Atlantic that was reclaimed from the sea. This part of Lagos was reclaimed from the sea. If there's any part that would naturally have to be flooded, it's Eco Atlantic. Yet, when the rain falls, the water is automatically dry immediately the rain falls because they built a system to protect that particular part of the city. Now, I have seen situations in Lekki. You see people building and sand filling canals. These canals that were natural pathways for flood water to move into the sea, to move into the lagoon. I'm seeing videos online where I'm seeing maps now, where I'm seeing like an overview of everything, and I'm seeing that people have started to sand fill canals in Lekki. Based on what's going on in this part of Lagos, combined with the fact that the development from the coastal road is going to be blocking some of those canal pathways, I'm projecting that there will be flood in Lekki for the next 3 to 4 months because the rains will not stop. Except some high-level demolition start to take place in those places. And common sense is now applied in building flood-proof developments. There needs to be a holistic approach to, okay, this is how we want to build our state. First things first, also stop sand filling floodplains. Floodplains are there for a reason. God made them so for a reason. When the rivers, the lagoons, the water bodies overflow their banks, those are the places they overflow to. They would naturally overflow to those places. God made it so. God made it so. It's just a natural programming of nature. Just the programming of nature to ensure that, okay, when the river overflows its banks, it overflows to this point. The only thing man can do is you can build flood walls, you can build um they'll say ocean walls, or you build river walls. For example, I think in Lokoja they built something like a river wall to prevent the water level from overflowing into the road. I don't know if you know for Lokoja, they did it at some part of the town. But the point is, why this thing has been said times without number. When you sand fill Yanowuro and you sand fill places like Ibutemeta, you sand fill Yanowuro, Ibutemeta, Ogudu, just expect it. It's natural. There's going to be flooding in Bagada and Kitu because the water has to go somewhere. Will move somewhere. You are sand filling your wetlands. The water will go somewhere. So it's a natural occurrence that basically is just sad, but it is what it is. Yeah, thank you.
I agree with you, David. It's the government needs to act fast, knowing that this flood happens yearly. Preventive measures need to be put in place before then as well. Like you said, it's been an occurrence. We keep going back and forth. Hopefully, the government is able to address this and address it fast so that no much loss of life occurs, as well as damage to property as well, and its effect on the economy. Thank you very much, David, for joining us and for sharing your perspectives on the issues that we discussed today.
Okay, thank you so much.
To all our listeners, this podcast is by SBM Intelligence. You can access our podcast by searching for SBM Intelligence anywhere you find podcasts. If you haven't already, be sure to subscribe, like, share, and let us know your thoughts about the three stories in which we discussed today. For deeper insights into our work, you can visit our website at sbmintel.com. Remember to connect with us on all our social media platforms. You can find us on X, Facebook, Blue Sky, and LinkedIn at SBM Intelligence. Thank you for tuning into the week ahead. Join us next Friday for more updates that are shaping the African continent.
Thank you.